have as our next speaker Elías Cisneros from the University of Bonn, who's going to now move to my part of the world, to Brazil, for a case study on Bolsa Floresta. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. So this is a primary for me with the microphone. Do everybody hear me? Yeah. No? Don't know? Okay. So I'm going to present today the first results I conducted on an incentive-based protection scheme in Brazil, and shortly to the context. Protected areas researchers found are very effective in reducing deforestation worldwide. Yes, but more important, it shows that multiple use reserves work better than strictly protected reserves. So reserves where actually people are living are more effective. Then further on, researchers found that protected areas with PAS schemes versus non-protected areas without PAS schemes also had a very good effect in conserving forests. But then our question is, what about protected areas without PAS schemes to protected areas with PAS schemes or incentive-based conservation programs? Yes, so we try to answer the question, do conservation incentives increase in protected areas in South? So our case study is the Bolsa Floresta Program in Brazil, which is under the roof of the Sustainable Amazon Fund. It is the world's largest conservation incentive program and covering around 10 million hectares of forest. And it is implemented in 15 sustainable use reserves in the Amazon, with one reserve even being the first R&D RED program project in Brazil itself. So in these reserves, about over 80,000 families live and are benefiting from this program. Yes? But they are highly reliant on forest resources and fish resources. So what does this program do? It is composed in 4 components. The Bolsa Floresta Familia component actually is a conditional cash transfer to families around $20 each month, yes? Which is conditional in the sense that they have to agree on good forest management practices. The second component, the Bolsa Floresta Social, is aimed to improve public services like health, education, infrastructure, investments. The third component, the Bolsa Floresta Associação, is composed to give communities funds which they can freely decide on what to use for. Yes? And one of the major components is the Bolsa Floresta Renda program, which is an income component which aims to invest in production lines already existing inside communities to induce higher productivity and therefore higher income. So, what does this program do for welfare and conservation issues? One thing is that this immediate cash transfer increases the welfare immediately, but also the development projects increase welfare and therefore potentially reduce the pressure on forest resources. Yes? But also this program partially offsets the opportunity costs of complying with the rules of the Bolsa Floresta program, which are slightly more restrictive than the already rules implemented by the sustainable use reserves. So, but also the constantly presence of the staff members of the Bolsa Floresta program induce a high monitoring and a high enforcement point that they collaborate also with local institutions. Yes? So there is a constantly increasing monitoring and enforcement on deforestation activities. But also, and this is the long-term aim actually of the program, is to build alliances with the local people itself. Yes? Where to say that in the sense that the conscience on environmental issues increase and also the welfare increase, the hope is that enforcement and monitoring comes from the communities itself. And they protect themselves from deforestation, but also protect themselves from illegal invasions from outside. So what do we have at hand? Yes? We have spatial information where the sustainable use reserves are without the PAS scheme, and we have a bunch of the 15 reserves where the Bolsa Floresta is implemented to be our treatment group, and the other without Bolsa Floresta being our control group. And we have yearly data on deforestation and yearly data on controls. So we choose as a unit of our analysis also these artificial grid cells. The 20 to 20 kilometer grid of the Brazilian Amazon you see here divided. And the red areas are redder the more deforestation happened in our time frame between 2007 and 2011. Yes? And the blue bordered areas are the ones that are sustainable use reserves. Yes? So you can already see that in these areas very low deforestation happens. Yes? But our question is that the green ones, our control group, the reserves that are sustainable use reserves, how do they behave in comparison to the treated reserves, which are the reserves where additionally Bolsa Floresta is active. So, as they are grid cells, yes, and borders don't fit to grid cells, they are grid cells where protection is below 100% and so forth. We exclude all the observations that are below 100% from the control group and also from the treatment group. But we leave it as a margin of 95%. So to say, yeah, 95% is almost like 100%. Something to discuss about. Also, we exclude the buffer areas around the treated reserves from the control group as to avoid spatial leakage in our estimations. And also we control exclude the border cells around Brazilian legal Amazon. So what do we want to have? We want to have the average treatment effect on the treated. Yes? So to say, we want to know for all grid cells that are treated by the Bolsa Floresta program, yes, what is the effect of this treatment? Yes? What is the difference between the deforestation that has happened in the treated grid cells compared to deforestation that would have not happened without the Bolsa Floresta program? Yes? But obviously this we can't observe because we don't know what would have happened without. But as econometricians do, we do an assumption. Yes? We do a conditional independence assumption. So to say that we want to have controls that are very similar to the to the treated group, yes, in terms of observables X. Yes? So to say that we construct our control group such as that they are so similar to the treated group that the only difference between deforestation between these groups can only have occurred due to the Bolsa Floresta program. And then we can do a simple regression, matching, means corporation, or a post-matching regression. So it all depends on our controls. So as to do, I choose three groups of controls. One is the grid cell characteristic of the grid cell characteristic of, if I am a grid cell, yes, then my characteristics, yes, are important. Initial forest size, past deforestation, market distance, distance to rivers, distance to roads, land use classes like agricultural coverage, pasture coverage, but also secondary vegetation coverage. Yes? But what also matters is my neighboring grid cells. Yes? So we include also neighboring characteristics like neighboring initial forest size and neighboring past deforestation. And as a third thing, I call it border characteristics. Yes? So I include a variable which is the percentage coverage of sustainable use status of my neighboring grid cells. So to say, if I'm a grid cell in the middle of the reserve, all my neighbors are obviously also 100% sustainable use areas. But if I'm a grid cell on the border of my reserve, then these 100% must decline to lower than 1, yes, because my neighbor is not fully covered. So in the matching, we first do a first step on regressing the probability of being included as a treatment or not treatment. Yes? So we regress on these three categories, the probability on the dependent variable treatment status 0 or 1. And I don't want to go into detail. This is significant. Somehow it isn't significant for the sustainable use reserve neighboring characteristic, and here something happens. But this is something we can discuss later on. With this, but this regression uses to predict the probability of being included in a propensity score matching afterwards. So what happens when we normally and naively compare control and treatment before matching? We see 80% less deforestation for the treated grid cells than for the control grid cells. So 80% less deforestation in Bolsa Floresta Program. But this comparison lacks, as I talked about it, of selection bias. Yes? So we control by matching on the covariates. I do two things. One is this propensity score matching, and one is the Mahalonis distance matching. Yes? And I do it for the three control groups, G, GM, and GB. And I also do it once with estimates without calipers, and second with calipers. With calipers means just that every match that is still by the algorithm matched, but the control and the treated are still far from each other, are excluded by this technique. Yes? So, for the first group, we find highly significant negative impacts of the Bolsa Floresta. So, to say about 14 to 20% less deforestation in Bolsa Floresta treated grid cells. Including neighboring characteristics, only the Mahalanobis matching estimation shows significant results. But including also the border characteristics, no significant results we have. What could that mean? It could mean, you have to imagine, now we are searching controls that include this neighboring characteristic. So we give a higher weight to the controls and choose other controls depending on these neighboring characteristics. So we find a negative effect if we don't control for it, but it seems to be that there is a detrimental effect of Bolsa Floresta at the border grid cells, so to offset the effect that was significant before. But this is a result or an indication to further research. Yes? So to research more on the grid cells that are at the border or around a buffer of the treatment groups. So comparing the P-score matching balance and the Mahalanobis matching balance. The Mahalanobis is in red and the P-score matches are in yellow. And you see that the Mahalanobis matching somehow is almost always better than the P-score matching in terms of the covariate balance. So we choose our preferred one, the matched Mahalanobis distance matching, and go on to a post-matching estimation. Yes? So to say, we have information actually on when Bolsa Floresta was active, in which year, in which reserve. So we want to exploit this information of being treated at different points in time. So after being matched on preconditions before treatment, we do a regression. First column, again, a simple OLS regression without matching reveals significantly decrease of 11%. With matching, yes, reducing the sample, we have no significant result. But the beautiful thing about panel regression is that we can include further variables, yes? So to say, time fixed effects, yes, year effects we include, or measurement errors of deforestation, we include also cloud coverage. And we see it's highly significant on a 5% level, reducing deforestation by 13%. And additionally, we can again include these border characteristics, and it stays significant. So what does that mean? It says deforestation is potentially decreasing in Bolsa Floresta program implemented areas. And it reduces by 12 to 20%, which is percentage very large, yes? But in this case, for these 125 grid cells we have treated, it avoided 243 hectares of deforestation. Okay, so the ICDP and pest components seem to additionally have an effect on reserves that already have a management plan, but this additional management plan seems to work better. And we have evidence of detrimental effects at the borders of the reserves. So further research must be an analysis on the buffer areas, and we have to largely decrease the grid cell size to 5 kilometers maybe, or 10. And it is caveats always we can discuss on the unobservables. Thank you very much.